This is going to be a second part of what I started last week with type 2 diabetes. Then I talked about what it is and what causes it. Today, I want to talk about how to reverse this. And this is a big deal. And I really want you to understand that we absolutely love having our clients come to us and we get them off medications they were told they're never going to be able to get off of, reversing diseases like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure that they were told they're never going to be able to get rid of. This isn't magic. All we're talking about is going back and eating the way God made us to eat centuries ago, because it's the new man-made food that's actually killing us. And so the way we go about this is I try to explain exactly what the nutrients do in your body and why it's so important to give your body the nutrients that it needs, because it's very good about taking care of itself. But when we give it toxins like we do constantly anymore, it really damages our body. And so that's all we're trying to do, is get people aware of how important nutrition is. And that's why we changed the name of our podcast to the Nutrition Prescription. So if any of you out there are interested and you would like help, and you just to go from the very get-go, depending on where you are, what kind of medications you're on, what kind of diseases you have, and we can see if there's something that we can do that can help you. So if you think you'd want to, just below in the notes, show notes, just click on the Wellness Solutions chat. It's just a quick 15-minute, totally free 15-minute call where we'll talk one-on-one. I'm not answering any questions or anything there. The whole thing is just to be able to assess, do we have something that can help you get to where you want to be? And if we can't, that's fine. If we do, that's great. But we can figure that out on the call, on the Wellness Solutions chat. Just click on the link in the show notes, get on our calendar, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. So now, first thing, what we wanted to do is I want to just recap real quickly what we talked about yesterday to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So remember, we talked about the 4 keys, and there's key number 1 is type 2 diabetes. Everyone, including physicians, have been taught by the drug companies that type 2 diabetes is a case of too high a blood glucose. That is not true. High glucose is a symptom of type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is a disease of insulin resistance. So I want to explain to you, and that's what I did last week, and I'll go through more, what exactly insulin resistance is. Because insulin resistance occurs when your insulin levels are too high for too long. And we'll go through this. And the reason why diabetic medications don't work, because all diabetic medications work on is trying to lower your glucose. The way they do that is they make your pancreas produce more insulin, or they make your cells more sensitive to insulin. Both cases, they're actually making type 2 diabetes worse, because that's a problem of too much insulin in the first place. So that's their way of getting more people on diabetic medications. When you take care of that, you know what causes your insulin go up. Then you can lower your insulin, lower your glucose, lower your inflammation, and get rid of your medications, get rid of your type 2 diabetes. And we have been helping many clients do this. So I know for a fact this can be done, and very quickly. It's not hard. It's very simple. It's just hard because the food companies have gotten everybody so addicted to carbohydrates and so addicted to sugar that a lot of people would rather just keep eating their sugar, even if it's starting to kill every organ in their body, because they think, oh, I'd rather die happy and die, or die young and die happy, than to live to be old. And that's not what happens. With our medicine, we can keep people alive for years and decades, but their quality of life is horrible. They're going into renal failure, liver failure, brain failure, high blood pressure, pancreatic failure, arthritis, all kinds of inflammatory diseases. As they get older, we keep them older, but we keep treating their symptoms so they have a horrible quality of life. My goal is to die very young, as late as possible. That's my goal. And that's my goal for you if you want that goal. So key number 1, diabetes is insulin resistance. It is not a high blood glucose. High blood glucose is just a symptom. The key number 2 from last week is when your insulin levels are high, it forces you to store fat. You cannot burn your own fat out of your fat cells when your insulin levels are high. When your insulin levels are low, you burn the fat out of your fat cells. You cannot store it. So that's the key to losing fat and keeping your muscle, is just to eat protein for your muscle and keep your glucose, keep your insulin levels low to burn the fat. That's the key to all this. And it really is that easy. If you want to lose fat and retain your muscle, then keep your insulin levels low. Key number 3, okay? The key is not how do you lower the blood glucose? How do I get my blood glucose down? What they're missing is the opposite side. What's making your glucose go up in the first place? And there's only 2 things that make your glucose go up. Stress is what your stress hormone cortisol does. It takes the glycogen, that's your stored glucose. You have 10% of your liver and 1% of each skeletal muscle. Stress causes you to get in that fight or flight syndrome. And so what it does is it causes you to burn your stored glucose because you want quick energy. But what's supposed to happen is when the stressor's over, your glucose comes down, your insulin comes back down, and you start burning fat out of your fat cells. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Okay. So the key isn't how do you get the glucose down. The key to reversing all of this, reversing all your diabetes, is don't get your glucose up in the first place. The only other way that you get high blood glucose is because you're eating it. It's that simple. You quit eating glucose and your blood glucose will not go up. That's all you have to do. That's all you really have to know. Key number 4, this is another one. You have to realize, because, and this is why they tell you about all you need to do is decrease calories and exercise more. That makes no sense whatsoever. When you exercise and you are using carbohydrates, you're using glucose for your energy source, you will never, ever tap into your fat cells because you've got about 2,400 calories compared 400 in your liver and 2,000 in all your skeletal muscles. You have 2,400 calories of stored glucose. So your body's going to use the energy in your blood first. So it's going to use your blood glucose first and then your blood fat. And then it's going to go to your stored. It's going to go to stored glucose and then stored fat. If you do an extremely hard weightlifting exercise for 1 full hour, the most you're going to burn is probably about 400 to 800 calories. And most people are not doing a full-blown heavy lifting workout for an hour. So you have 2,400 calories just in glucose stores. If you do a full-blown hard workout, you're never going to get through that 2,400 calories, and you've got to get to that before you get to your fat. So that's why exercise is not how you lose fat. The only way you lose fat is keeping your insulin levels low. We've talked about the 3 pillars of disease. The 3 pillars of disease are having high insulin levels, having inflammation throughout your body, and having high glucose levels. When you have those 3 things, you are damaging every organ in your body. And those 3 pillars are exactly the same 3 pillars that are causing type 2 diabetes. And all 3 of them can be totally reversed by watching what you're putting in your mouth. The 3 pillars of disease: high glucose, high insulin, inflammation. If you're starting to put something in your mouth and you look at it and say, where'd this come from? If it came from an animal, if it's meat, fat, eggs, cheese, yogurt, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, eggs, any of that stuff, that comes from animals and you're good. Anything else, it's going to come from either man-made food or God-made plant-based food. Man-made food and box, bottle, bag, and cans, stay far away from it. Okay, that's loaded with nothing but glucose and things that keep you hungry. So you're starving all the time. You're always eating them, and you're making them trillions of dollars while it's killing you. So man-made food, box, bottle, bag, and can with an ingredient list that's more than 3 or 4 ingredients in it, and you don't know what those ingredients are, I guarantee they're chemicals that are killing your body. Obviously, man-made food's out there. As far as God-made plant-based food, we're talking about fruits and we're talking about vegetables. It all depends. They all have glucose in them. Some have more glucose than others. So if you're already diabetic or if your insulin levels are high, even if your glucose is normal, but your insulin levels are high, that's pre-diabetes. And so even if you're in that situation, you really want to stay away from the vegetables that grow below the ground, because that has starch in it for the plant, and starch is just long chains of glucose. So there's a lot of glucose in the plants below the ground. The plants above the ground, they don't have very much glucose in it. If you want some kind of plant, the vegetables, the green leafy vegetables grow above the ground, those are not going to be your downfall. That's going to be man-made food. Most fruit has fructose in it. Fructose gets turned almost immediately into fat as soon as you eat it. Think about how bears, how they fatten up for hibernation. They go around, they forage all the berries because all that fructose going into them, it gets turned straight into fat. It fattens them up and they can sleep for the winter. Glucose comes from plant-based foods and man-made food. Okay, so just got to be careful which ones. High insulin. Your blood insulin goes up because you put glucose into your body, like we just talked about. So if you're not eating that food, your insulin level is going to stay down because glucose raises insulin a lot, protein raises it just a little bit, and fat doesn't raise it all. So this whole thing about eating fat's what makes you fat is the most crazy thing that I've ever heard of. And I was believing it. I believed it just like everybody else until I actually got into it and realized what our body does with nutrients and realizes that was marketing. That was all marketing. They're still telling everybody, stay away from meat, eat carbohydrates. It's the craziest thing. When you look at what our bodies are made of, we're made out of protein, fat, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, and water. That's what our bodies are made out of. It is not made out of glucose. Inflammation, there's different kinds of inflammation. Inflammation is actually good. The inflammation that you get from all the chemicals that you're putting in your body from this man-made food, that's the bad inflammation. Acute inflammation is good. That's like your body's military. That's how it takes care of things. So if you get something like a splinter in your finger, or you get a broken bone, or you get pneumonia, those are all acute signs of stress that your body does. And it sets up the inflammatory response to get rid of those. But then you heal it and it goes. Chronic stress is different. That is not good for your body. That is extremely inflammatory. It puts glucose in your blood, keeps your insulin levels high. Chronic inflammation is like stress. If you have chronic stress that you deal with day in and day out, year after year, that's chronic stress, and that is killing you more than you realize. You're thinking about the mental part of it, but you got to be thinking about the body part too, and it all goes together to make you crash. So if you are chronically stressed, it is very key to figure out how to get rid of that stress. And there's all kinds of ways out there to do that. We talk about some in our podcast. The other way you get chronic inflammation in your body is you're constantly eating chemicals. We put all these chemicals, when you put nutrients in our body, protein, fat, cholesterol, vitamin, minerals, even carbohydrates, our body knows what to do with those. All these chemicals in this man-made food, our body does not know how to do with it. And now they're putting chemicals all in our fruits and vegetables too. They put chemicals out in the field, then they come in, they put more chemicals on them when they're in the processing plant. It's just horrible what man-made food is doing to us. So that's what it is. So that's high glucose, high insulin, and inflammation. So the whole process of disease, of diabetes, this is what happens when you have diabetes. First, you eat the glucose. When you eat the glucose or eat the carbohydrates or eat the man-made food, those are the things that are made out of glucose, that gets into your intestines. Your body doesn't see all the food you're eating. All it sees is what your intestines break it down to. And all carbohydrates get broken down to glucose. Every bit of that you're putting glucose in your intestines, that gets absorbed in your blood. Once the glucose is in your blood, and actually once you get a sweet taste in your mouth, you don't even have to wait till it's in your blood. Your body starts producing insulin because it does not want a high blood glucose. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. So you eat the glucose in the form of carbohydrates or man-made food. Then your blood glucose goes up, your blood insulin goes up. When your insulin goes up, it tells your body, tells your liver, turn all that glucose that you just ate, turn all of that into fat in the form of triglycerides. Then what insulin also does, remember we said when your insulin levels are high, it forces you to store fat. When your insulin levels are low, it forces you to burn fat. So when you eat glucose, your glucose levels are high, your insulin levels are high. So now your insulin that just told your liver to turn all that glucose into triglycerides, now insulin is telling the fat cells, take all those triglycerides inside and store this as fat. So these cells, they do that. They store this as fat until that fat cell gets full. And remember, you have billions of fat cells all over your body. So this takes years and years of you constantly eating glucose, constantly turning it into triglycerides, constantly storing it fat. And as each one of your cells becomes fully full, that cell is called insulin resistant. The reason it's insulin resistant, it has nothing to do with insulin. Your insulin is working perfectly fine, has nothing to do with your pancreas. You're still producing all the insulin you need. And it has nothing to do with the cell. Your fat cells are doing everything it's supposed to do. The fact is, it is too full. It can't take any more of the triglycerides. So now that cell is considered insulin resistant. And it does this through all the fat cells in your body. Okay. And that's where genetics come in as far as how many fat cells you have, where they're located. But your body is just storing these in all the fat cells that you have. As each cell becomes stuffed, that cell becomes insulin resistant, but you still have other cells. So that's why this takes decades for this to happen. But pre-diabetes is when your insulin levels are high, because as you start filling up all your fat cells, then now it takes more insulin to try to figure out where to put all these triglycerides. So insulin resistance is actually for these decades that you continue to fill your fat cells, your insulin levels are high, but your glucose levels are still normal because your insulin can still put them in some more fat cells. That is pre-diabetes, high insulin, normal glucose. What the drug companies are telling the physicians about a pre-diabetes being an A1C of 5.7 to 6.4, that is marketing. That is, if they go in with an A1C like that, because that's low, that means you've had high insulin and normal glucose for decades, and now all of a sudden you filled up all your fat cells. You are filling them up. So all of a sudden your body can't handle it anymore. So now your glucose goes up. And that is what the medical community is telling you is pre-diabetes. That's basically diabetes. You're way late in the game if you wait for that glucose to go up. What you want to do is measure your insulin, your fasting insulin, and measure your fasting glucose, and that'll tell you how far into your pre-diabetes that you are. And I'll explain that in just a little bit also. So diabetes, you eat glucose, your blood glucose goes up. When your blood glucose goes up, your pancreas produces insulin. Insulin comes along, turns all that glucose into triglycerides and fat, tells your fat cells to store that in fat till the fat cells become insulin resistant. That is what pre-diabetes is: high insulin, normal blood glucose. And then when all your fat cells are totally full, now you have full-blown diabetes. Okay. And this leads us. So let's go through this. Key one. Remember, the key one is high blood or type 2 diabetes is insulin resistance. High blood glucose is that's just an adverse effect. That's a side effect. That's a symptom of having high insulin levels. So insulin resistant, you have stuffed fat cells. It takes decades. We just talked about that. And you keep going, pre-diabetes again, you have high insulin, low or normal blood glucose. So what you can do this, you can check your own insulin level and check your own fasting glucose level. You do not need a physician to do this. There's a way you can do this. It's called Own Your Labs. Own Your Labs, OWNYOURLABS.com. When you go to ownyourlabs.com, you can use all these different things you can pick from. You can do a lipid profile and fasting insulin, fasting glucose, all these different things. And it's cheap. You just click on it. For an fasting insulin, it's only $14.40 as of this morning. To get a full-blown lipid panel, it's only $10. So you go on, you click on there, which labs you want. They'll send you orders for that lab. Then you're going to take that to a place somewhere close to you that draws your blood. There's like LabCorp or Quest. We did LabCorp. It's LABCORP. But my wife, she got on. She ordered her own fasting insulin. Then she got her orders that she could take to LabCorp, gave to LabCorp. They drew her blood. They sent it in. And within a week, we got the results back. Cost $14.40, and we had our results back within a week. No physician was needed. That's what you need to do. And you got to look at your insulin. Don't look at the reference range on the sheet, though. And I don't remember what this sheet is. It may be fine. But in general, they tell you that if you have a fasting insulin less than 20, you're good. That is not true. That is not true at all. That's because they think everybody is eating carbohydrates like the diet, like our dietary guidelines and our food pyramids telling everybody. So they want you to keep eating that stuff because that makes them a lot of money with food. It makes them a lot of money with medications. So you do not want an insulin up around 20. You want that less than 5. And really, you'd like to have that less than 3 if you can. So if your insulin level is up around 20 and your blood glucose is high, that's diabetes. But if your insulin levels is up around 20 and your blood glucose is still normal, that's still pre-diabetes. So how to reverse type 2 diabetes? Remember the key number 2, high insulin makes you store fat. Low insulin makes you burn fat. So the key is keep your insulin levels low. Okay. So when you keep your insulin levels low, you're burning the fat out of your fat cells. So now think about it. You've got a full fat cell, and now you're keeping your insulin levels low. So you're bringing that fat out of that fat cell. Now that you bring that fat out of that fat cell, there's more room to store some. So if you keep eating glucose, you'll fill that back up and it'll become insulin resistant again. So this is not a quick fix. It does work good. It will bring your glucose down. It'll bring your glucose down almost immediately. Within a week, your glucose will be down normal, because if you're not eating it, your glucose levels are not going to go up. So you can handle that. If you can keep your glucose down by not eating carbohydrates, then now you don't have to be on diabetic medications, because that's all they're focusing on is glucose anyway. But remember, you need to get off diabetic medication as quick as possible, because the way they bring the glucose down is after you've already eaten it. How are they going to get the glucose down? And they do it by increasing your insulin. So that's why you want to get off diabetic medication as soon as possible, but you also don't want a high blood glucose. And again, I'll talk about that in just a little bit. So you do want to bring your glucose down, but it's not by bringing it down. It's by not putting it up in the first place. That is key to all of this. Okay. So you can bring your blood glucose down so you can get off the meds. If you get off the meds and you're not eating the stuff that makes your glucose up, that means your insulin levels are automatically going to be coming back down. Also, if you're not eating all this man-made food that's causing all this high glucose and all this high insulin, you're not going to be getting all the chemicals either. So that really is the key to all this. Now, I understand a lot of people are extremely addicted to carbohydrates and they love the taste of sugar. So the whole thing that we try to help people with is a lot of it is the mindset and clearing out your house, clearing out your mind and resetting your mind, instead of thinking, oh my gosh, that sugar tastes wonderful, thinking that sugar is killing every single organ in my body. I want to keep it out of it. And that's going to take a mind change. Some people can make that change quick and some people can't. What's so sad is what tends to make people do that is when their best friend dies of a heart attack, or their sibling, or somebody's dying of heart attack, somebody going into renal failure, somebody's dying because they've been on dialysis because of renal failure. That's when they finally wake up and say, something's going on here. Think about that now. This is the perfect time. The perfect time would have been doing this 10, 20 years ago, but the second best time is right now when you find out about it. Be careful what you put in your mouth, and you can totally change. You can totally improve the quality of your life as you get older. So again, now do not decrease your diabetic medications on your own. Never do that. Let your doctor know. You've got to do this with your doctor's knowledge, not with his permission, because I guarantee most physicians seriously don't understand diabetes. I was that same way. I was a doctor of pharmacy for 35 years. All I thought was the same way. How do you get a glucose down? How to get a glucose down? Never were we ever taught to look on the other side. Why is it going up in the first place? And that's the key to everything. So now you know why your blood glucose is going up. Your doctor will not know that. So you're not asked for his permission, just his knowledge. Say you are changing your nutrition without exercise. You're changing your nutrition. And so you're pretty sure your glucose levels are going to be going down on their own. And you really need to be in contact with them, because if you are bringing your glucose down on your own because you're not eating it, and you take diabetic medications that make you produce insulin that you're not needing, that will make your blood glucose drop too low. That's when you get into hypoglycemia. Everybody worries about, oh, my blood glucose is low. I feel it because I'm feeling lightheaded. That only happens when you use glucose for your energy source. And now all of a sudden you've used the energy that you have and you've got to eat more to put it in there. That does not happen when you use fat for your energy source, like God made us, and we've been doing since the beginning of time. When you use fat for your energy source, you've got energy on board all the time. You constantly have energy. That's why you don't get hungry. That's why you don't need to eat. You can eat once a day, once every other day. If you want to, you can do that, but you still need to be increasing your protein, because if you don't eat it all, now you're not getting the vitamins, you're not getting the minerals, and you're not getting the protein. And you've got to have the protein to keep your muscles having muscle, because that's the problem with all these other crazy diets and crazy drugs that these drug companies are telling everybody. They make it where you don't eat it at all. So yeah, you lose the fat out of your fat cells because it's burning for energy, but you also lose all the muscle out of your muscle cells because you're using that for protein. You're not getting vitamins and minerals, so you're actually eating yourself. It's auto cannibalism. You're eating yourself from the inside out. That's what we want to do. You want to lose the fat and maintain the muscle and keep the vitamins and minerals coming in. So again, go to your doctor, make sure he knows you're getting ready to do this. Monitor your glucose if you need to, because when you're not eating it, your glucose is going to come down. So once that starts happening, that can happen like within days, 3, 4 days. So be very careful. Be careful as you change your nutrition that you know your physician is on you. You might even find out in advance. Ask him as your glucose is coming down, what would be the best way to do this? Because you may not need another doctor appointment to bring it down. So he may let you know, just cut this tablet in half, or instead of taking it twice a day, take it once a day, or however he wants to treat you, because everybody's different as far as how you're being working. So again, you need your doctor's knowledge. You do not need their permission, but you do need their guidance on how to lower this the best way since you're doing it naturally. How do you keep your insulin low? Stop eating carbs. Stop eating glucose. It is that simple. Again, it's not that easy because we're so addicted to carbohydrates. Most people are, but it is really that simple. And it's not about how to get glucose down. It's how to not get it up in the first place. So remember, and this is a hit from what we talked about last time also, the stages of diabetes. When you're looking at glucose and you're looking at insulin, the early stage of diabetes, when you're healthy, your insulin levels are low and your glucose is low. Everything's low like it's supposed to be. You're burning fat out of your fat cells for your energy. That's exactly what you need to be doing. Okay. So when you eat anything, your glucose goes up, your insulin goes up, and you store that in fat cells. Then you go for the long periods of time where you're not eating anything, like when you sleep, if you're doing intermittent fasting, or if you're eating a keto or carnivore diet, you're not going to be getting very hungry because you're already giving your body all the nutrients. So when you quit eating that, now you fill your fat cells when you eat, and the whole time you're not eating, you're sitting there and you're draining your fat cells. Then when you eat, you fill them back up. When you're not eating, you drain them again. If you've got a lot of fat cells, then you don't want to be doing the things that you're eating and you're filling it back up again. You don't need that phase. You already have plenty of fat cells on there. So that's why you want to stay away from the plant-based foods, stay away from the man-made food. And again, we talked about the plant-based foods. Some have more glucose than the others, which means some make your insulin levels higher and longer than others. So that's where it comes into individuality. And that's where we can help you with that if you would like for our help on this. So anyway, low insulin, low glucose, and that's when you burn the fat out of your fat cells. When you get prediabetes, remember, that's when you have high insulin, but your glucose is still low. When you have high insulin and your glucose is low, that means your insulin, you are still filling up all your fat cells. So there is a place for the glucose to go, which is get turned into triglycerides and go into fat cells. Okay. But your insulin, it's more and more work on your insulin. So your insulin levels are high. That is prediabetes. It is not an A1C of 5.7 to 6.4. Like we said, you're already into diabetes if you're waiting for that to happen. Okay. So you want to get this long before that. And then when you have full-blown diabetes, it's when you filled up all your fat cells. There's nowhere else for you to put the fat. It starts storing all the fat around your internal organs. And that's when you get all the issues that we start seeing. So that's when you're a full-blown diabetic, is when you have high insulin levels and high glucose levels. And now you're storing fat around your organs. And that's what you don't want to be. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, stay nourished and stay well.